Arthroscopic posterior glenohumeral capsular augmentation with Gracilis allograft performed at the University of Rochester by Dr. Michael Maloney.
Viewing through the anterior portal of a right shoulder, a posterior capsular suture is placed using a secure posterior cannula.
A percutaneous portal is established for anchor placement. A guide is placed on the glenoid bone surface, and a drill bit is used to establish an inferior pilot hole for the soft tissue graft. The anchor is inserted through the percutaneous portal cannula. The graft is then loaded into the anchor using the lasso suture passer through the posterior cannula as shown. The graft is shuttled into the joint through the posterior cannula and secured into the inferior pilot hole with the interference fit anchor. Suture is trimmed from the inferior end of the graft. Gentle tension is placed on the graft, removing any redundant tissue from the glenohumeral joint. The guide is again placed through the percutaneous cannula onto the glenoid face, establishing the posterior superior pilot hole for anchor placement. The second anchor is inserted into the percutaneous cannula and loaded with the lasso suture passer in the same manner as the first anchor. The looped wire is used to shuttle suture attached to the second limb of the graft into the anchor. Using the suture, the graft is shuttled into the glenohumeral joint and secured into the pilot hole using the bioabsorbable interference fit anchor. Once ensuring a secure placement of the anchor, the suture end is then trimmed through the posterior cannula. Gentle tension is placed on the apex suture to remove redundant graft material from the glenohumeral joint. A pilot hole is established at the posterior margin of the humerochondral surface adjacent to the graft. The luggage tag suture at the apex of the graft is loaded into a bioabsorbable suture anchor and secured into the pilot hole. This is performed through the posterior cannula. The apical suture secured within the anchor is then tied using a knot pusher to the initial suture placed into the posterior capsule. The ends are trimmed through the posterior cannula. Redundant graft material is removed using radiofrequency ablation through the posterior cannula. The procedure is now complete with a final look at the graft.